Welcome to the First Customers Podcast. I'm Paris Vega, your host. Today we are here with Matheus Riolfi from Tint. He's the CEO and co-founder. Tint is an embedded insurance platform. They've raised $30 million in venture capital investment from Y Combinator and others. They work with clients like Uship, Deel, and Outdoorsy. Matheus, welcome to the show.
Hi, Paris. Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
All right, let's get right into it. How did you get your very first customers?
Well, we're at Tint, so we started Tint about 5 years ago, and we got our first customers. I think it was a lot based on our network. So Tint, it's a network. I can describe the company later, but we're basically on the B2B space. So for us, I think it was important to have people who knew us, and then could kind of not only have a conversation, but trust us enough when there was nothing there. It was only an idea that we would be able to deliver results to them. So we really lean deeply into our network and people that will work with us, former colleagues, investors who we knew to get our first customer. And I can talk more about it as well.
Yeah. All right. So when you say you used your network, what did that look like? Were you using certain platforms to reach out to people in your network? Did you do specific things to build your network in the first place? Go into detail there.
Yeah, so I graduated from business school, and at the time I was running one of my startups, and I realized that that startup didn't work, and I realized that I was missing a few things, and one of them was um, a professional network in the United States. I was born and raised in Brazil, so I came here. I didn't know anyone, and I had to build all this from scratch. So after my previous startup, I joined this company called Turo, which was at the time was a small Series A startup out of San Francisco. And I stayed with the company for about 4 years, which I thought it was enough time to kind of know a lot of people that worked with me and other folks in the Bay Area. So that kind of was what my main strategy was, to join other company, build my network. And then by the time we started Tint, I had a Rolodex on LinkedIn, I would say, from other days of people to message and get feedback in our idea, and eventually led to some of those customer conversations as well.
So you came to San Francisco knowing, hey, I need to build my network. What gave you that kind of context for, or that overall strategy? Was that something you were taught in younger years, or what gave you that initial kind of goal and mission to build out that network?
I believe it was the experience of trying to build a company, a startup in the US, in the Silicon Valley, without the network. So
Okay.
it's very hard to your point, convince our first customers in the B2B space, where there is like, it's a bigger purchase. There's some kind of a lot of trust involved. And it's harder to raise money. It's harder to convince people to take a bet on you when you have nothing but an idea without knowing people, right? And I think as an immigrant, I had that back home in Brazil, but I didn't have it here. So that's why, I tried to do that, go straight to jumping to my startup after business school, but then I learned the hard way that I needed a bit more if I wanted to be successful here.
Talk a little bit about what you did with that first experience and what that maybe painful process was like when you were just trying to get out there and do your very first startup. What'd that look like?
Yeah, the first startup was in the travel space. So we're trying to do streamline the process of group travel. So give groups of friends and families traveling together better access to pricing for flights and hotels. That was the general idea. So it was as a B2C. We were selling to consumers. Um, I think getting customers at the time was not as hard, because as a B2C business, you can put advertising on Google. You can put a website, and you have more organic traffic. So we were trying, like at that time, the main issue for us is getting partners to give us better rates, raising money from investors without knowing anybody here. So then I think I learned the lesson that we really needed to have a solid foundation, know a group of core people before we wanted to start my next venture. And then when I was like fast forward to Tint when we were starting the business, I had spent 4 years at Turo, so I had worked with a lot of people. We have like not only kind of building professional but building personal relationships as well. So my the CEO of the company was our first investor check. He knew us. He kind of trust us and thought that we would be good founders of startups. So it was a very different conversation than the one I had when I tried to do that with like knowing anybody.
Right. And you went to Harvard, right?
Yes.
Okay. See, and I think you said you got an MBA there.
Hmm.
Okay. And so were you trying to build your first startup before graduating from Harvard, or is that after? Because you'd
You
think that that would give you some credibility and, would get an attention from people because that's a big brand, university wise.
Yeah, no, it does. It definitely opens doors. So I worked while I was at business school, and I worked like a few months after a graduation as well. And I think it does open doors, but
Hmm.
used to like you don't have the full kind of trust and relationship, right? So sure, like granted, like we could have gotten the first meeting, and that the idea was already enough to captivate people's attention from investors, from customers. So there was definitely some other kind of business issues there that were beyond just network. But I can say that like it was a lot harder going to these first conversations when you don't have a connectivity with the person. Well, after the way like after working for 4 years in the Silicon Valley and building those relationships, those flow a lot more naturally because as a founder, your first customers is taking a huge bet on you, right? Especially
Right.
in B2B, like what we do, like we were powering a critical part of our customer problem. Like if Tint failed, our customer's product will fail. So getting somebody to actually make this bet on you, I think required them to kind of know you before and kind of knowing that you worked on that specific problem before, then you know what you're talking about. And I think there was no, it is still very hard as you know by doing this podcast. It's always hard to get your first customer, but I would say it was significantly easier after we had that kind of trust network in place.
And you said it was about 4 years of working in the tech
I
industry.
spent 4 years at Turo. That's right.
Okay. And that was enough time to build up your network. So what did you do on the job while you were actively trying to build the network? Was it just literally doing your job, going about, just doing your tasks, or did you do things to intentionally build your network?
Both. I was definitely in a leadership position with the company. So by the nature of I was heading up international expansion. So I was running everything outside the United States, and I spent time in Canada, then in London. But I was always kind of like really in sync with everything that's happening in the company. Naturally, my day-to-day job, meeting like external partners, meeting the kind of the core team at inside the company. So I think that is important. So you have a job and have in a place that gives you visibility. But I was also actively looking for it. So I took the time to talk with a few investors as I was exploring ideas and signaling to them that eventually I would like to start my own company. And that's why I'm here. So like you start building that relationship as well. So I did both the internal effort, but also the external as well.
Okay, cool. All right. And so when it came time to start Tint, the current
Mhm.
company, um, talk us through that very early stage of what you did to get your first customers.
Yeah, I think what we do, we help tech platforms create their own embedded insurance products that protect their end users from the risks that are inherent to their core business. So, for example, we work with Uship. You can ship anything to their website, like a car, couch, whatever you want.
I just shipped
And
a car through Uship recently.
so you see the experience, and at some point you're
Yeah.
offered to buy shipping protection because
Right.
something can go wrong in the process. And
Yep.
then we help those tech platforms address those intrinsic risks so that now you can have a better experience as a customer, right? And for Uship, they have happier customers. They can monetize this as well. So like that's what we've done. And this is an idea that came while we were working at Turo. So at Turo, both my co-founder and I, indirectly or indirectly, work on the insurance products that the company offer. So we realized like now there was a great opportunity for tech platforms to embed insurance into their products, but we also saw how hard it was to do all of this without the proper help, the software, the service, the know-how required, and that's why it was inspiration to start Tint. So when we started to approach our first customers or trying to interview who could be our first customers, we were very targeted. Like we were working on something we built for Turo in a way, and now going to other people we knew in our network in other companies, including Turo, saying, "Hey, what if we do this for you? Like, what are your pain points?" So we started really a discovery process, trying to understand. Like we knew the direction, but we trying to understand exactly who would do it. So our first step was LinkedIn. Everybody that it was in the transportation space, which was where we initially started, that could use our product, and having as many phone calls as and coffee chats as we could to start like seeing who would be interested in being our first customer.
So you said you started reaching out through LinkedIn.
Yes, that
Okay.
LinkedIn has always been my go-to platform. If I don't have the person email directly, but I'd say
Yeah.
for a lot of folks as they move jobs, it's kind of hard to keep track of their professional email. So I
Right.
use LinkedIn a lot.
That makes sense. So when you reach out on LinkedIn, is it just using the direct messaging feature, or do you do posts and content to try and pull, attract leads? Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, at the time, direct messaging, because again, we had an idea, high level, what we want to build, but then it's like having a lot of one-on-one conversations to try to like unlock what are their pain points on that space. So we knew we're going in embedded insurance space. We knew we were focusing on tech platforms, in our case, in the transportation space. So we kind of narrowed the search down to those folks, but it's still going with an open mind and like asking more questions about their problems more than pitching a solution at the time. So it was all this kind of one-to-one relationships. And then eventually that evolved to even like to a proposal. Okay, I heard you. This is roughly what you're trying to solve. We can build that for you. Let's do a pilot or let's get started. And then bring to get it to the first sales. And after the first sale, then we start like to like broadcasting a more standard message because at the time
Mhm.
we knew what we were selling, but it was not until after we had say the first 2 to 3 customers up and running.
So when you were reaching out to the very first few, it sounds like you were doing or offering kind of a more of a custom service, and so you were kind of scoping out a project and then building a solution that solved their problems, and then were able to scale that to serve lots of people's problems. Um, can you talk a little bit more about that messaging for the first few customers? Like, what did that first DM look like?
Yeah, so I do think that for the first customers, especially in the B2B space, you gonna require some level of services and customization, right? And again, we
Okay.
are insurance is inherently a professional services, so we are using technology to completely reinvent insurance, but there's always a service component involved to it. So in our case, again, we knew the direction, but within the direction, we will just listen to what are the pain points, what are the main things that they are trying to figure it out, and try to collect enough, like 1 or 2 or 3 like use cases that are similar. Then we can start building for one of them. Because one of the key challenges of startups early days is that if you customize too much and you lean too heavily on services, then you never build a product. And then eventually you are a service company, which again, nothing wrong with that, but that's a
Yeah.
very different path than building a venture backed startup, which
Yeah.
was
Harder.
our case. Like we're building a venture backed startup.
Yep.
So like you have to balance this kind of early customizations, which is always required, with trying to find commonalities and building a product and a technology to address those commonalities.
How many clients did you build custom solutions for at first before you're able to find those common patterns?
I think our case was 10 or so.
Really?
Yeah, and I think again they're all using the core technology, but they
Hmm.
all had like different flavors and spins to it. I think it took us a good and again something about our business which can be different. We are on the kind of high ARR, like 6-digit ARR model. So we're selling more almost kind of wouldn't say enterprise, but for larger checks for larger customers. So that also impacts the kind of how you think about it. If you are in a business that like sells for $20 a month or something like that, then
Yeah.
obviously you have to early on like get to some customizations because you need hundreds of thousands, if not millions of customers. Like in our case,
Right.
I think our business can be very successful with 100 customers that work well or 200. We're definitely not going for the thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers.
Right. No, that's a very interesting point. Yeah, because the bigger ticket item that you sell or your plans are, that gives you a lot more room for the customizations and to deal with whatever issues the client may have. Because yeah, you've got the revenue coming in to justify it. You don't have to worry about scaling that quantity of customers early on. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely one of the, and as founders, that's kind of like I don't know when we started about like first B2C, if it's B2B versus B2B, the size of the ticket, like all those things are gonna influence how we're gonna do your first sales approach, right? Like in our case, our first contract with a customer was already tens of thousands of dollars, even when we had almost no product. So that's why in my case I was emphasizing the network, the previous trust. Like you needed some in order for somebody to kind of sign that kind of checks and put their reputation on the line for you. They need to have a strong level of confidence that you can actually deliver, right? In our case, luckily we had that. We had our first customer was a former colleague that worked with us at Turo that had moved to a different employer, and he had worked with us. He brought us in. We run a pilot. We could demonstrate the results on the pilot for the time the pilot was going. So it was a big risk for him, but it was a much more digestible than if he had just met us 2 months before, and he would have to do the same.
So you raised 30 million in venture capital from Y Combinator and a few other investors, and that's kind of like another type of customer in a way. You know, you're selling the investors, convincing them, pitching them. Um, Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so our thing it's similar in a sense, right?
Mhm.
Like fundraising is sales. You're selling
Yeah.
a portion of the company to investors, and they need to see the ROI. They need to see the same way that the first customer, we need to be convinced that there'll be an ROI, that you're going to create value that is higher than how much they're going to pay you. I think it's the same with investors. They need to be convinced that by putting $1 in your company, it's going to grow, right? They're going to get more money um, out of it. So my approach was again very similar, right? So as I mentioned, our first check, so our first customer as an investor was my
Hmm.
former boss, the CEO
Right.
of Turo. So he knew us. He knew us. Me and my co-founder. We both worked at Turo.
Okay.
um, he tried to convince me for all of like 5-10 minutes to stay when I told him that we were leaving. But he knew me, he knew what I want to do, and he was very supportive. And he was our first check. And then from there, he introduced us to our first institutional check, this
Okay.
investor called Web Investment Network, or WIN. So again, that was the beginning, and we raised our first $500,000 or so through this process, plus a few other members in that network. And that was our first step, right? So again, I think it would be hard to have the same process if I didn't have that network, if I didn't know those people um, beforehand, or if I hadn't actively build that by staying 4 years kind of working in a startup
Right.
before doing the leap.
So that relationship with the CEO became critical, it sounds like, in the starting of Tint, since he trusted you and you'd built enough, I guess, good enough reputation working there, obviously, to where he would trusted you with that first check and then introducing you to his own network. I mean, that shows a high level of trust.
Yes. And he's still a mentor. Now we keep in touch even now 5 years plus after I left. He's still a friend, a mentor, and provide a lot of feedback to our company. So again, like the network gives you more than money or access, right? It gives you content. It gives you different kind of people to bounce ideas from. And I think that was
Yeah.
really the beauty of the Silicon Valley, right? And in this model, this very strong ecosystem where former founders, investors, operators can all come together in large numbers, uh, and that kind of magic happens. I think with remote, this is changing a bit, but no, 10 years ago when I arrived in Silicon Valley, that was still the case, right?
Yeah. Okay, this is good stuff. What would you say would be advice for somebody starting a new company today, given the current environment we're in the business world? We got AI coming up, shaking things up. Um, a lot more remote work. Let's say somebody's just starting out, they're wanting to get their business off the ground, or they got an idea, they're just getting started. What's your advice to them when it comes to getting those first customers?
Yeah. So again, not coincidentally, I would say lean into your network. Like try to figure out who are the people who know you that can be your investors, can be your mentors, and can be your first customers. Right? Like again, as we discussed, depending on if it's B2B, B2C, or the size of the check or the ARR for or the average contract value for your company, but like try to take advantage of that network. Like people say that even from in the Silicon Valley, a lot of the first checks come from family and friends, right? And the
Yeah.
reason is exactly that those are folks who know you, who trust you, because in the early days, as I mentioned, both from investors, the sale to investors and the sale to your first customer, it's a bet on you. That's really nothing in the early days. So that's why it's very important to lean in. And some people may have some apprehension doing this because they're like, I'm not sure if the idea is gonna work, and what if I fail? I don't want to let my family down, my friends down. But no, the reality is like anybody that is involved in this venture game or in this startup game know that that's a possibility, and that's okay, right? Like as long as you work hard and you're learning, and people will understand if even if things don't work.
Do you have any books that you recommend entrepreneurs to read?
Um, I do. So let me see that like 0 to 1 from Peter Thiel, I think is one that I believe like for kind of this very early moment to the first customer, um, it's important. The other one that I like is about like challenger sales, which is a little bit more towards like later stage sales. But I do believe that one way you can add value, even in the early days, is like having a strong viewpoint, a domain expertise in something, and sell that as your first step into convincing customers to pay you, even if it's some consulting or something that can get you at the door, um, and get started.
So with Tint, are you guys kind of leveled off? Do you have all the customers you need right now? Are you still growing and trying to scale up farther? Um, where's the life cycle of Tint right now?
Yeah, we're definitely still growing. We are early stage, still Series A company, so there's a long journey ahead of us
Gotcha.
before we are mature or we are stable. So it's still in the fast growth, fast pace phase of the start of the company. But the Series A is the phase you transition from, like you talk about 0 to 1. We are now on the 1 to 10 journey, right? Like so, we're
Okay.
closer to 10, and then you get to 10 to 100, which is the kind of
Gotcha.
scaling phase. We are right in the transition between the two, and it's been super exciting. We're about 50
Yeah.
people now, so we grow very quickly. We were four like 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago, so like it's definitely been an interesting journey for us.
So as you're going through this scaling phase, and you said early on you were focused on like software platforms in the transportation industry, what's your ideal customer profile now? Your ideal target customer?
It's a still a tech platform, but now we are mostly vertical agnostic. So we have
Okay.
customers in over 10 different verticals from transportation. We started like Outdoorsy or rider shares or companies on the kind of transportation sharing like Turo were in the early days. But right now we have customers like Uship in shipping or Deel, which is an HR platform. We have guesting vacation rentals. We have Quantstamp in the crypto world. So like we're now building a horizontal platform, so we're platform agnostic. And the best for us is like mid market, so series B, C, D. So a company that has already rich product market fit, has a certain scale, but is not too large yet. So we operate better in that space.
Okay. So it's more about a certain company size and life cycle is the target at this point.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been really interesting, man. I appreciate you making time for us today. Why don't we close out by you giving kind of a pitch or just explaining the value of your service to that ideal target customer profile? If 1,000 of those ideal customers are listening, what would you tell them? Why should they sign up for Tint?
So the main value prop is like every platform has intrinsic risks, right? So again, if you're shipping things, um, the things will break, right? Like it's statistically speaking,
Mhm.
it's going to happen. So normally customers have this apprehension when they're thinking about using a service, and by launching embedded protection products, the company can turn that like fear into value. So by say providing a shipping protection that helps the customer if anything breaks, and they can increase the conversion of their car business so their normal product becomes more attractive, and they can also monetize that. So in case of Uship, I don't know if you noticed, but they sell the protection for an extra fee, so that can even
Right.
become important profit center to the company. So what we're seeing with our customers is a no-brainer decision because you convert better your car business and you make more money. So that those are the two main arguments, and we make it everything so easy for them to implement and take care of the end-to-end experience that comes with very little lift on their side.
Awesome. Okay. So if you're a tech platform out there looking for another way to make a little extra money and offer insurance to your customers, you can reach out to Matheus and he can get you set up. It's a really cool business model. I'm just trying to think if any of the things I'm involved with could use it, but I don't know if we'd be considered a mid-market tech platform. We're not that big yet, so we got a
Yeah,
little
we're
ways to
happy
grow.
to talk with any founders, and then even if it's not a good fit for whatever reasons, like we
Mhm.
always help founders. We send them
Okay,
the right way. Like as you can imagine, I'm very excited about talking to founders and any new ideas that are happening
cool.
out there.
Well, thanks for sharing your insights with us today, Matheus, and everybody listening. Reach out to Matheus. Reach out to you on LinkedIn or go to
That's
your
yeah, that'll
website.
be the easiest place. That's right.
All right. We'll see everybody next episode. Later.
Thank you very much. Bye.